I'm Suzanne Giesemann. I'm a spiritual teacher, an author, and a medium.
What is the soul?
I find it's easiest to understand the concept of a soul if we use the analogy of the sun being analogous to the one light of consciousness, and the rays that go out are the soul. And the soul is a direct expression of consciousness. So if we as humans are an expression of the soul, then the human side of us is limited consciousness, and the soul is spacious, less limited consciousness.
Is a soul born? Does a soul die?
I find that everything that exists is an arising within consciousness. So to say that the soul is born is really a concession to the way we speak as humans. The soul arises as a thought within the mind of God. How's that? The soul is an expression of consciousness, and it simply arises. So if you want to call that being born, the soul is born when Source just has to create something beautiful, and that's the soul. So in answer to the question, does the soul die? Let's use another analogy of the soul is like a wave in the ocean. It can't be separated from the ocean, but it arises, it has its lifetime, its experience, and then it settles down and becomes once again just part of the whole ocean. So it still exists as part of the ocean, but its cycle has completed. But that wave can always arise again, always a little bit different than the last time around, but always part of the original source.
What's the difference between a young soul and an old soul?
Well, I believe that a young soul and old soul are terms that we use to justify people's behavior here on earth. A young soul is somebody who's still acting very human, who has forgotten that we're here to shine, to be the expression of love. And an old soul, you know them when you meet them. They are loving, they're kind, they're compassionate, and we'd like to think that's because the life cycle of the soul, they've had quite a few human incarnations, so they're an old soul.
What is the soul's relation to Source/God?
The soul is a direct emanation, a direct projection of Source, of God, but it's far more limited than Source. And yet the human side of us is that much more limited than the soul. So it's all a spectrum of consciousness, but it's all the same energy information. It's all the same essence. And that essence is love. They say that humans, or even the soul, is created in the image of God, but that's not because God is some physical form or has a physical form like a body. We are the arms and legs and voice of this formless divine intelligence. And so the soul gives Source a chance to experience life through being the soul. But the soul is also formless. So the human expression of us is the chance for Source to experience the fullness of life in a human body. Or take that to any creature. Source simply is. God, consciousness simply exists.
Mind, body, or soul? Which is the real us?
I've had higher beings in meditation tell me that anything that can be created in consciousness is real and can provide healing, growth, learning. So everything that we experience is real. Body, mind, and spirit are simply different expressions of one divine mind.
Are human incarnations voluntarily chosen?
It's only after we get here that humans forget who we are, and then we say, are you kidding? I am never coming back here again. And yet we get to the other side and we're so surrounded by love, We can't deny who we are. And after a period of rest and reuniting with loved ones who have passed, we kind of say, like, put me back in, coach. I'm ready to have another go at it. And we're eager to come back here. We know that it's going to be challenging. We know that there's going to be pain as well as pleasure, but the soul also knows that's how we're going to grow. And the soul wants nothing more than to bring back more love to this beautiful experience of simply being the soul.
What's the purpose of life on the physical plane?
To my understanding, we're here to be the arms and legs of Source, to have the experience of living in this world of many opposites, but at a level in which we can reason and use logic, unlike animals or plants. This is how we're created in the image of Source, being intelligent for the most part, and creative, and interacting with others. But why specifically we come here, why did Source create at all, is, well, if you consider an artist, a writer, a composer, who has all this creativity inside of them, and it just has to come out. You just have to express it. So here you are as Source, just being, and everything is peaceful, but after a while, this potential that's inside you just has to come out. And so here we are. I truly don't think that we come here with some wish to experience pain, but we as souls know that there's going to be pain, but we also know that from that pain, some of our greatest growth is going to ensue. Everybody I talk to who has gone through the death of a loved one would never wish to go through that again, and yet looking back on it, they all see how much they've grown from it. The souls know this before we come here. They also know that all of that pain, the entire life in a human body experience, is temporary. And with that awareness, they're willing to come back and have the full experience of being human.
Many people experience challenges while living in a body. Does the soul seek such challenges? And if so, why?
The soul comes here absolutely knowing there are going to be challenges, but I have spoken to so many souls across the veil with evidence that I'm actually communicating with them and have asked them, did you know you were going to take your own life beforehand? Did you know that this tragedy was going to befall you? And I've been assured by those souls and higher beings that no soul comes here to deliberately perpetrate evil or harmful acts. However, souls know when they choose their parents that they're going into a situation with other family members, with those parents, with certain perhaps disabilities in the body, that there is going to be the possibility of experiencing greater challenges than others. It's our human free will when we forget who we are. We forget that we're souls that cause us to make choices that hurt each other. But nobody comes here deliberately deciding to murder another person. So with that awareness, the soul comes, and always with the highest hopes that they'll make the right choices, but knowing that if they're taking on parents, for example, who might be alcoholic, they might know that already, they're going to be advised by others around them, that's a tough assignment. Are you sure you're up for it? And they say, put me in. I can handle this. I know I'm going to grow a lot from it. So we definitely know there might be certain challenges, but not all of the details, and that's really what allows for a lot of the growth that we experience.
Do souls have more than one incarnation, either on Earth or elsewhere?
To the best of my understanding, souls have limitless incarnations. My guides have told me they're not necessarily linear, and it's hard for us to wrap our heads around a concept of no time and parallel lives and multiple lives. But the best explanation I can give right now is that the soul is analogous to a deck of cards, and each lifetime is one hand that we're dealt. And so we play that hand, and it has certain characteristics, certain cards that go with that hand. And after this lifetime, that hand goes back into the deck of cards, and we, as a soul, decide which cards we want to play in the next hand. And so any hand that's already been played can always be dealt again, which is the biggest question I get as a medium. What if my loved one has already reincarnated before I cross the veil? It doesn't work like that. Yes, they may be reincarnated, but that hand that was your loved one will always exist as part of the soul's entire deck of cards.
Does the soul plan its incarnations ahead of time?
The evidence from speaking to other mediums, from hypnosis, from those who've had near-death experiences, definitely does point to the fact that we plan our incarnations, that we do plan to come back, and we choose our family members, our roles, many details about our lives. But there are always wild cards, and that's a result of free will. As far as soul planning, why don't we picture what happens when we're going to go on a trip? We know where we're starting, we know where we want to end up, we have the map laid out, and there are certain routes that we can take. We actually choose basically the route before we come into this lifetime. Every once in a while, because of our free will choices, we might get off and wander off the path a little bit, but that's why we have helpers in the spirit world, our guides and our loved ones on the other side, kind of gently nudge us, put thoughts in our heads, hey, you're getting off path here, you want to get back on track. So there are certain milestones that we absolutely want to accomplish while we're here, and that can include career path, family, or no family. And all of those things factor into how much we grow, how many opportunities we have to be the expression of love in human form, which is the whole reason we're here.
Do we have soul groups that we incarnate with across different lifetimes?
This is something that we can't prove, but speaking to those across the veil who have passed, they assure me that they have met up with soul family. And we recognize those soul family members when we're here. There's a connection when you meet somebody that you just know you've been through lifetimes together. And the thing is, we play different roles when we're here. So my guides have jokingly said, whoever in your family is pushing your buttons this time, you get to push their buttons next time around.
Are there contracts or agreements between souls?
To my understanding, we do have contracts, we do make agreements with souls that we are going to help each other grow once we come into human form. So that happens through relationship, which is always going to give us the greatest opportunity for growth. If we stay alone in our house and never go out, never interact with anyone, never get into relationships, we're not going to experience very much growth. So across the veil, we can see how these things will likely unfold, and we agree to be in certain relationships with others, which is why, for example, when I met my husband for the first time, there was just a recognition. There was no mistake. We are meant to be together, and the way that has played out has proven it to us over and over again. It's a soul thing. At the soul level, we decide in advance what characteristics, what personality traits, what challenges we want to take on. And that could be as simple and as challenging as working on patience or dealing with anger. And you recognize in human form what you signed up for, because you will attract to yourself someone who brings you the opportunity to work on that. So if you're in a relationship with someone who is constantly making you angry, that's their job. You signed up for them. And so when we cast blame on someone else, we're missing an opportunity to say, wait a minute, what if I came here to allow that person to be themselves, but I'm the one that wants to work on the anger. When we turn this around and see things from the soul's perspective, growth and happiness ensue so much more quickly, because we're not here to change that other person. When we change from the inside out, the freedom that comes from that, the improvements in our relationships are miraculous.
Do spirit guides or angels assist us?
When I was back in the Navy, I couldn't even talk about spirit guides or angels. I was sure they didn't exist. And now I can guarantee you, angels are real. We would not get through this life unscathed if it weren't for them. Yeah, sure, we stumble a lot and we get hurt and they don't always answer our prayers, but sometimes that's for our own good. They're helping us so much more than we know. And the problem is we don't ask them often enough for help. Asking angels and guides for help depends a lot on trust. Trust that they're here when we can't see them. So to ask them for help is as easy as just trusting that they're here, and they are, going to the heart instead of the head that's going to try to talk you out of it, and just ask from your heart like you would ask a best friend, hey, I really need your help here. This is the issue. This is the specific help I'd like. Please help me, or something even better. Always go that extra step because we don't have the bigger picture that they do. Because we are direct expressions of consciousness, and so are angels and guides, they can inspire us with our own thoughts. We often think our thoughts are our own, but trust me, many of those brilliant thoughts that we have, go do this now, write this now, call this person now, are put in our minds by our higher helpers. The more we act on the nudges, the inspirations, the out of the ordinary thoughts that we have, the intuitions, and we see that it leads to better things, we come to trust that, hey, I didn't really come up with that on my own. I'm not alone. And we get in the habit of asking, acting only when it's helpful, and then realizing we have a lot of help here that if we'd only known earlier, we wouldn't have stumbled so much.
What is death?
Death is when the life force, which is source, expressed through the soul, withdraws from projecting the physical body. So it's no longer animating the body, which is physical matter from our perspective as humans. It's really energy information, and the body returns to the original elements. But meanwhile, that soul that animated the body still exists. And the role the soul was playing as you and as I continues across the veil, but without a body. So death is really a transition to a new state of being, but you carry with you the full awareness of everything that you experienced while in a physical body.
What is the veil of forgetting and why do we need it?
The veil is not a real thing. It's a metaphor for, number one, the result of having a brain which filters out consciousness. And that's a good thing, because if we were aware of all the energy and information that's around us, we would be in pure chaos. The veil is these patterns of thoughts, all of the experiences that are constantly arising in awareness that are keeping our focus on the objective world to the exclusion of our inner world. When we can pause and shut out all of our objective experiences and pay attention to what's naturally arising here and now all the time, then the veil dissolves. There's really no difference between the inner and outer world. It's a matter of focus. We call the veil the apparent separation between the two states. As far as forgetting who we are, who hasn't had the experience of going into a movie theater purposefully to forget about your life? We just want to get away from that and absorb ourselves in the drama that's on the screen. So the soul doesn't deliberately want to forget who it is, but once we get caught up in the drama of this human experience, it's very easy to forget, oh, that's right, there's a greater part of me that's right here, right now. So it's not necessarily intentional, but the soul knows that it can very easily happen.
Discuss the role of free will in a given incarnation.
Well, we have to ask ourselves, why have an experience if every detail is planned out? Source is far too creative to just put itself here in human form knowing the outcome. Free will is the wild card. Free will is what allows us to both create and evolve as a result of our choices. So not knowing how everything's going to come together often results in even greater results. Of course, free will choices can also take us in the opposite direction, but happily, that ongoing connection that we enjoy with the soul And our relationship with guides and helpers keeps us on track, and the soul's ever present nudges help us to make greater choices with that free will. We definitely have free will. Not everything is determined. And that free will is what allows for greater growth, for evolution. Unfortunately, for those of us here who stumble a bit, humans learn by trial and error. We know that coming in here as souls. And so there is great forgiveness across the veil when we make choices that aren't aligned with the soul. And it is through pain, through choices that could have been better, that we realize there must be a better way. So pain is not necessarily a bad thing. So trial and error, the result of free will choices, they're actually gifts in disguise.
Is life on the physical plane an illusion?
Some people say that this world is like a simulation, an illusion. It's very real to those of us going through it. I deal with people who are grieving every day, and they will tell you their pain is very real. The illusion is that it's the only world. The illusion is that we're separate from each other. Otherwise, what is real is what you're experiencing in this moment. So I would never downplay these experiences, but there is a much deeper reality that most of us are not aware of.
Do we create our own realities?
We definitely create our own realities. We can look around and blame our situation on other people, but where you are is the result of every choice you have made. Every time you said yes to someone, every time you said no to someone, it led you to where you are now. So we are creators, just like we are expressions of the one creator. It's all connected, and every choice that everybody makes melds into this one big creation, but every decision, every choice we make is equally a part of that.
Describe the life between lives.
I deal with people who have passed every time I give a reading, and many times their loved ones want to know what they're doing on the other side, between lives. I didn't used to trust the answers until those across the veil gave me evidence. For example, if somebody really liked to golf here, they may actually be golfing across the veil and enjoying a hole-in-one every time they golf. I didn't know they liked to golf, and so the fact that they tell me this is part of the evidence. When you do this often enough, you come to trust that when we get across the veil, we get to create our reality instantly. We create it here in physical form, but it takes time sometimes for some of our decisions to play out. Across the veil, you want to play golf and get a hole in one, it happens instantly. After you get so many holes in one, kind of loses the luster. So you say, well, what do I want to do next? And when you've had the full experience of everything you didn't get to do while you were here, then maybe it's time to start thinking about having another incarnation. We don't always have to do human things. We can not create a form at all and simply exist and shine as the beautiful lights that we are. Perhaps if we've had enough incarnations, we might begin assisting others as a spirit guide, but that takes a pretty advanced soul to make that kind of choice. Even more so than here, souls on the other side realize that life is all about connection. So across the veil, many souls end up helping either those across the veil, for example, welcoming those who have just crossed. There are some who go to healing type places, and there are other souls helping them there to integrate the experiences they had here. For example, people who took their own lives often go to a healing environment, and they receive counseling of sorts from other souls. It's always a loving environment. Many times those who have passed from drug overdoses have told me that they are inspiring people here to make higher choices, helping those who have addictions by putting thoughts in their head of how they might improve their lives here. So across the veil, there's very much an emphasis on service to others.
Are we judged or punished for our mistakes in the afterlife?
From what I've been told by talking to thousands of souls across the veil, the only ones who judge across the veil are ourselves. We judge our own actions when we are shown all of the choices that we made and how those choices affected others. So no judgment, and that's kind of a hard thing when we're in only human mode, because the human wants revenge, wants justice. When you can feel the full impact of your choices, once you cross the veil, for some people, that's judgment enough. So that behooves us to make better choices while we're here.
Is there such a thing as hell?
I have read accounts of people who have gone through areas of what we call lower vibration, a hell in its own way. But none of the souls who I've talked to in doing thousands of readings have come to me from that place. I believe that we experience a hell of our own making when we go through the life review, and if we have made choices that hurt others, it is hellish to experience that pain for ourselves. So to avoid that, we simply make better choices while we're here and make our amends while we're here as well. There's no reason to go through that kind of pain over and over. So living for all eternity in hell, I just truly don't believe that exists.
Describe the life review.
The life review is like watching your entire life played out like a movie, but in fast motion, and focusing on peak experiences, both good and bad, very emotion-laden experiences. But as those across the veil have told me, you not only experience what you went through again, you feel it from the perspective of the person you were interacting with at the time. So this can be either painful or pleasurable, but you also see those moments that you didn't think were important, such as when you stopped and gave a loving gesture to somebody who needed it just in that moment. You see how that may have completely changed someone's life. So it really would be a great idea if we each went through our own life review at the end of each day, so that we could plan perhaps better choices the next day. That's really what the purpose of the life review is, for the soul to come back and do better next time. But we can take that as a microcosm right here in human form.
What is karma?
Karma is a result of the soul having many lives and wanting to take what was learned in one life or what wasn't perfected in one life and bring it forward to another incarnation to work on that. It's not a punishment, it's an opportunity.
How do you define forgiveness?
The best description I ever heard was that forgiveness is cutting the cords that bind you to someone who has hurt you in some way. Until you can forgive them, you are always going to be connected to them, and not in a good way. So forgiveness doesn't say that what they did was okay, but when you say, I forgive you, now you're free.
How do you define happiness?
Happiness is the feeling, the experience that results from making choices and taking action that are in alignment with the soul's true nature. So anytime that you're kind or compassionate, not focusing only on the self, when you're feeling freedom, when you're aligned with the soul, the result is happiness.
Discuss the idea of oneness/unity and how we can apply it in our everyday lives.
Oneness is a bit of a nebulous concept because we don't experience it with our physical senses. We see each other as separate. But I'm going to get a little silly here, but I was shown something this morning from my guides, and I don't know any other way to show you than to draw a couple of little faces here on my fingers. Okay, so here we have three little figures here, and they appear separate, and they might go at each other because they don't realize that under the surface they're all connected. And that's what's happening with us here. We're only looking at the surface level. If we all realize that we're part of one body of humanity, we couldn't possibly hurt each other. That's oneness.
What does the belief in separation cost us?
The belief that we're separate costs us our happiness, costs us joy, costs us opportunities to share and love each other. It is an illusion, and it causes us to focus on ourselves to the exclusion of others, realizing that at the deeper levels, there is no other.
Where is heaven?
Anywhere you are, when you are aware, I am the expression of Source. I am love in full expression. That's my acronym for life, is heaven. So we tend to think that heaven can only be achieved when we no longer have a body. But when you embody the soul, heaven is a regular occurrence.
Where is God?
To me, God is synonymous with consciousness, with pure awareness before any stories and ideas of separation arise. So God is nothing that we can localize. God is everywhere and nowhere. We can't even put it into words. God simply is.
Many believe we're shifting to a higher consciousness on this planet. Do you agree? And if so, can you describe this shift?
I do believe we're shifting to a higher consciousness. When we realize that each of us is a light, the soul is the direct expression of the one light of God, then each of us is like a light bulb that as it goes on brings more light into our world. One person said they can't make a difference, but somebody just said yesterday a fact that we've all heard, that all it takes is one light, one candle in the darkness to brighten a room. So as more and more people are coming to know we're not separate, we are souls here and now, our light literally shines brighter, brightening our world, raising the consciousness of humanity as a whole. And therefore, there's hope for all of us because we are raising consciousness one soul at a time. And the angels and the guides tell us they can see the light growing brighter.
What are some practical applications of the idea that we're eternal spiritual beings?
The biggest fear people have is of death. We just don't want to talk about it. But it happens to everybody. And when it happens to somebody that we love with all of our hearts, we suffer terribly. As a medium, the greatest gift I can give anyone is to let them know your loved one is right here. Their physical body may have died, but they are still with you. And I guarantee you, you will see them again. The benefit of knowing life is eternal is that our pain may be here now, but that pain is temporary, and that suffering is a result of not understanding that life is eternal.
What's the secret to remembering who we really are?
The secret to remembering who we are is shutting out the external world, ceasing to rely only on our physical senses, which absolutely deceive us to thinking this is all there is. We have to make pauses regularly, at the very least once a day, to be quiet and go within, to move beyond the story of me and just be. And then notice what arises in that silence when there are no external cues. That will change your life more than any other practice.
What does our soul want us to know?
Your soul wants you to know, I'm right here. We are the direct expressions of love in full expression. That's life, that's God, that's Source. You are never alone because that's an impossibility. The bottom line, the soul wants you to know you are so very loved.
Is there a positive message or message of hope you'd like to leave us with?
I have a dear friend named Brenda who came to me within hours of crossing the veil, of dying. And she said, Suzanne, we're all walking wounded. All humans have suffered trauma. You can see the scars from up here, but the ones you work on, they look like little glowworms. See, there's this light inside of us that never goes out. It's just waiting for you to reveal it to the world. You may feel wounded, you may feel like a victim, but the truth is, at the level of the soul, you are already whole and complete and loved.